Welcome back. So today we're going to work on charts and graphics, which is an integral part of this course and an integral part of any business major's vocabulary. What happens is the higher you get up in management, the more and more people want to see data in a visual graphical format as opposed to just a bunch of raw data. So I consider this lesson critically important. So take the time you need to not only read this chapter, but to practice it. Don't be afraid to experiment around with different parts of chart building. So let's get started. Again, we're in the acquaintance stage of the course, so right now we're reading through some fairly boring lessons in the step-by-step book, but again, these tools are necessary in order for us to begin our bigger graded problems. So be patient. In this chapter, we're going to focus on several things. We're going to learn how to create charts. We're going to learn about the different types of charts that Excel has to offer. We're going to learn how to customize chart appearance, how to use summarizing data techniques so that we can recognize trends. You'll also in the lesson learn about smart art and how to create shapes. So let's get going. As always, go ahead and in your notebook update the things that are of importance to you. That would be shortcuts and things you may not be familiar with as you work through the lessons. For example, did you know that you have a great deal of control over the appearance of your charts? So remember that, and again, don't be afraid to experiment. Excel 2016 has a cool feature called a quick analysis lens. You'll read about that. Don't be afraid to try it out. And some new charts this year in the newer version of Excel 2016 include a waterfall, a Pareto chart, and a histogram. So take a look at those and let's get started. So this workbook should look familiar to you. It's the one that we used in our last module called Module 4. And so we're going to continue building upon those lessons. So in this case, reading through the Canvas directions, our first challenge is going to be to create a bar chart that lists the first name of all of our friends and family that we've used on the worksheet and also lists their ages. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to copy just the first names as well as the ages over to a new tab. So we'll be dealing with some clean and fresh data. So to do this, I'm going to use the Insert Sheet tab. And I am going to go back to the family and friends, and I'm going to go copy the 5 names over. And you should know how to copy by now. You can use keyboard commands, which would be Control-C for copy and Control-Z for paste, or you can use the icons. I'll go ahead and do that. So I'm going to copy and come over to my new worksheet and paste it anywhere you please. Let me paste that in. And then I'm going to do the same thing with the ages, but you're going to notice something happens. Remember, this was a formula. And if you want to go into the cell to refresh your memory on what kind of a formula it was, go ahead and do that. But formulas don't automatically copy over, so the copy is not going to be a problem. I'll go ahead and hit copy. But you'll see that the paste is going to give me an error message. Okay, so let me let you see it. Let me try pasting it. And you'll notice that we get this value. So I'm going to hit the undo button, which is my favorite button on the whole template. It gets me out of trouble. And instead of using the regular paste command, I'm going to use a special paste command because all I want are the values. Okay, so we've copied our data over. Let me make this bigger so you can see it. And just to clear the clutter, let's assume that we're only going to copy the ages with no decimal places. So let me format that to get rid of the decimal places. And we're ready to begin our chart. So the first one I'm going to do is a simple bar or column chart. And again, it's very important that you understand that there's only a few steps to charting, and it's important that you master the steps. So the first step, once we have our data, is to highlight the data. It's easiest if you get them side by side or in adjacent cells like that. And I'm going to go to the Insert, and we're going to go pick the different type of column chart that we want. And here it is. And if you want to click the drop down box, it'll give you a various choices. Again, you pick whichever kind you want. I'll go ahead and pick an easy one, the 2D column chart. And there's a basic chart. I also want you to become very familiar with these 3 action buttons. You'll see a listing of them in the Canvas work. You'll be using those often. And I also want to point out that once we create the chart up here, we have what's called this contextual menu, which means these menu tools are only up there when we are creating charts. We have 2, Design and Format. So here's a few chart basics, and again, I encourage you to read through the lesson, to read through Canvas, and then to go back, maybe even look at this video. So charts have some basic elements. All charts should have a 3-part heading, the same 3-part heading that financial statements have. So remembering back to Accounting 100, that's the who, what, when, with line 1 being the who, line 2 being the what, and line 3 being the when. So on the first line, that's going to be the name of the company. I'm going to use my last name, and I'm going to give it a company name, something like maybe Johnson Consulting Group, something like that. The second thing is going to be what it is that you're charting. So for my title, I'm going to call this Ages of Family and Friends. And then my third line is either going to be a date, a specific date that this information is as of, or it's going to be a period of time depending on what you're charting, just like financial statements. So I'm going to go ahead and use today's date, which is August 3rd. And there's my 3-part heading. The next important part of a chart is that it should always contain data labels. For example, if I asked you by looking at this how old I am, my name is Debbie, how old I am, you'd be hard pressed to tell me whether that was 51, 52, 53. So the way that we get around that is by adding data labels. There's multiple ways you can do this, which you'll read about in the lesson, but I'm going to go over here to add a chart element, and I'm going to choose data labels, and I'm also going to choose where I want the data labels to appear. I'm going to choose the outside end because I like the look of that, but you could change it to be whatever you want. And in a nutshell, I have a pretty decent looking chart. There's other things that you can play around with. You could make it different colors. You could make the fills being gradient fills, that kind of thing. Don't hesitate to play around with it. I can't emphasize that enough. So again, these buttons are important. You could play around with them. Let's see what this one does. It tells us that we could change the style or we could change the color. So if you don't like blue, pick a color that you do like, maybe green. And here's a different type of button. It's called the Elements button. You can change, add, subtract different things, but that's a pretty basic chart. And in fact, I would say that's a nice looking chart. It doesn't have any information on it that is not relevant. So it looks like, as far as the bar chart goes, we're good to go. The other thing I wanted to mention to you is that you can move charts to be wherever you want. I believe I had you set them up in separate tabs. So if you wanted to move this, again, using the contextual menu up here, you'll see there's an option to move the chart. So if I click that, you would have the option to put it in a new sheet or to put it in an object in an existing sheet. So just to show you how this works, maybe I want to stick it as a new sheet. So I could even give it a different name. Maybe I'll call this bar chart. And when I press OK, you'll see that my chart has now been moved to a separate tab all by itself. Okay, so once again, please, please, please take the time to experiment around in this lesson. You will be doing charts on every problem that I assign and on every quiz, including the final. So take some time to experiment around with this lesson. I'm also asking you to do several different types of chart. I believe there's a line chart in the directions, as well as a chart of your choice. So again, don't hesitate to experiment around. That's what this class is about. And as always, I'm here ready and willing to help you. Again, before I leave you, I wanted to point out these 3 action buttons that are on charts. The first one is called the Elements button. The second one is called the Style and Color button. And the third one is what's called the Chart Filters button. It'll give you all kinds of information in the book on that. So complete the quick study task, and as always, make sure you save it with the correct file name, make sure your work prints out properly, and upload it to me on Canvas. Don't forget to read the feedback on your graded work. And as always, make sure in addition to the quick study task that you post to the discussion board and you also take the short assessment quiz. And you guys know the drill. I'm here ready and willing to help. Make sure you contact me if needed, or feel free to also contact your classmates. And I look forward to talking to you again real soon.